everybody, welcome back to the KSR YouTube channel. Today we're going to make some noise with a real deal NASCAR. Well, the engine's not a real deal NASCAR, but something a lot of you might recognize. It's actually an LS. So this car saw some track time in the Cup Series with Ricky Stenhouse driving. Apparently it wasn't a whole lot of laps up at Watkins Glen, and from what I've learned about these cars, the Watkins Glen cars were some of the best ones to get for road racing use, because Watkins Glen is very equal right-hand turn versus left-hand turns, instead of a car that's like a car that's set up for the Roval would be more balanced to turn left. So these chassis are pretty square, and that's what you want when you're getting one of these to build like a road race car out of it. So we've done a bunch of work on it, a lot of little things kind of going over it to get it where it should function really well. We finished mounting the radiator fan. We worked on mounting this expansion tank, which if you follow the lines here, this line here comes into the bottom of the expansion tank. So this water is going in right here at the water pump, comes out here. We redid this because it had kind of a long radiator hose on it. Got that on there, kind of nice. And the way these expansion tanks work, the steam ports, which we welded a little steel bung on that so we could use a 4AN line and return the steam ports into the expansion tank. There's an air bleed off the top of the radiator, and the idea is that it is kind of a constantly bleeding system, a lot like a more modern vehicle. If you take a look under the hood of your car, your street car, you might see that it's got kind of like an expansion tank set up on it. So we actually haven't cranked the thing since we built all this, and it's got some water down in there. Not really how much you can see, but yeah, about to get ready on cranking this thing up, doing a little bit of bass tuning on it, and then taking it back to the dyno and doing some real tuning on it. So follow along, let's get to work. All right, well, while you're here, please subscribe to the channel, give us a like and a comment. I try to get down there in the comments and talk to everybody as much as I can. And yeah, that's what we try to do on this thing. Also, if you guys need welding stuff, go to usaweld.com, and you can use the Win with KSR discount code and get a discount on your order. And a lot of you, might be welding in your garage. You can get a discount on your supplies, on your welders, all that good stuff. And one more plug. If you want KSR merch, winwithksr.com. We do have some new stuff in the works for you guys, but for right now, it's just a lot of our old stuff. Our Everything Needs a Turbo hoodies and shop hoodies have been really popular this time of the year. So appreciate everybody for buying all those, but let's get back to the NASCAR. So one cool thing about this setup, the way Phil's got it done, is it has a dry sump pump on it, which you can kind of see hidden down in there. And if you look, well, I've got the belt off of it right now. Well, this thing it's been here for a couple of months, so we've been working on other projects and also mounting the seat in this car, which was a pretty good fight that Drew went through over there. Drew's somewhere hiding. There he is. He's also working on the C10. Video coming on that pretty soon. CJ's over there drinking water because it's so hot today and we're all very dehydrated. No, anyways, he's working on putting Sean's Chevy 2 bag together, which we'll have some videos on that coming up soon, getting it ready for Sick Week. But anyways, on this NASCAR, it sat here for a little while, and I want to make sure that it's primed. And with it being a dry sump system, it has the oil tank actually back here under this box. And this sucker holds like 5 gallons of oil. So we've put oil in the thing. Well, we topped it off a little bit. Phil said it needed a little bit more oil in it. So we got that topped off. I want to prime the oil system before we crank it. And all you gotta do is get you a drill with a setup that fits the bolt here on the end. And do a little spin like we're running the engine. And I can feel it loading down. You can see it's got some pressure because now it's spinning backwards. Let's go see if I got the dash on still. Yep, so you can see the oil pressure there still bleeding down. So we know we've got oil everywhere through the engine. I've kind of gone through and put a base tune in it. updated the computer to V6, the latest firmware from Holley. Let's see if it cranks. Make sure we're out of gear. We'll cycle the key so we'll get a fuel pump prime. Actually, you know what? Let me set a data log parameter so that we can log this start, whether or not it cranks or not. Well, you know what? I should probably put the belt back on it. Pause. Alright, so I'm going to look at my data log, see what it looks like it's doing. All kinds of new things to see with a new combination. Probably need to go adjust the throttle blades, which we'll find all that out once I get it up and running. Kind of see what it's doing for air fuel. But hold on a second and we'll get back to it. Alright, well, we're back on this the next day. Last night I ran the battery dead because I forgot to turn the alternator on, and those couple of times that I had cranked it and it was getting cold, which I probably should have stayed on it last night because this morning it's really cold. It's like 40 degrees outside right now. And for us Florida people, that might as well be Antarctica, because Florida people, we're just not used to this. We're just sensitive to the cold. Okay, I'm making excuses. Anyway, I looked through the data logs a little bit last night, loaded the tune in it, and I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to crank. With it cold started, we got the battery charged up. We're going to turn the alternator on once it cranks. Let's make sure we're in neutral. Yep. Let's see what happens. Alternator on. Oh, it's trying. I also had to do a little bit of rewiring on the idle air control motor because it wasn't working. Now I can hear it working, hear it hissing. Wait, we'll take this around to the dyno and shut it off before I gas out the shop. All right, well, we are up on the dyno with Phil's NASCAR, and I mean, there's just something cool about that. Got a real deal former NASCAR Cup Series car on the dyno. That's just cool. So one of the things I do whenever I'm dynoing any car with any kind of performance tire on it, I air the tires up to like 25 or 30 PSI. These we did to 30, just so we don't have any kind of like, we don't want any kind of tire growth. If you start your tire pressures really low and then you're making lots of runs on the dyno, they may build heat in them, especially if they're so low that the sidewalls are wrinkling. Now, if you have a huge amount of horsepower, you may have to play around with your tire pressure to keep your car hooked up on the dyno. But for something like this, shouldn't have any problem keeping the car hooked up even without doing anything special with the straps or anything like that. But I air them up so that they don't build an excess amount of temperature in them. Not like 50 or nothing like that, but I put these up at 30 PSI. So you can see they're nice and round. And they shouldn't build too much pressure, which can actually alter your numbers. Some of you guys that may not have ever used a dyno before, one way to show some abnormally high horsepower is to jack your tire pressures way up. And that's not realistic. Like, you want realistic numbers for what the car is actually doing. So I'm gonna go jump up in there. Let's go for a ride. All right, well, I got all my fans on and did a little bit of work in the area that little tip-in area on the table. So I'm gonna see if it'll do a little bit of driving without falling all over its face lean like it was doing before. So one cool thing about the transmission in this car, I don't have to use the clutch to shift it. I'm going to, just to be nice to it, but you can shift this thing wide open, supposedly, just by yanking on the shifter and pulling the next gear. But I'm not gonna do that. We're just gonna cruise it a little bit, and then move on from there and see what we need to see in the data log. Here we go. fix that. All right, we got to see why it's stalling like that, which I think I have an idea why. All right, so I did some adjusting on the throttle blade to actually open it up a little bit so that it relies less on the idle air motor. Usually once your engine is fully warmed up, you want to have your throttle adjusted so that your idle air is only showing, usually I try to go between 5 and 8%, because when the thing is fully warmed up, it shouldn't hardly need the idle air motor to run, right? So the idea with that, now that I've done that, I'm gonna have to go back and double check the startup tune when it's cold, because I had to put, I think I actually opened it up about 3% on the, from where it was before, so then I had to go do a TPS auto set, get all that stuff zeroed back out. So now that it's got more air mechanically, I have to go back in and adjust everything electronically to make sure that it still has the right amount of air for the engine to crank up, idle, cold start, all that stuff. So we're ready for another pull. Hopefully I've got the dyno filtering worked out and we'll get some good RPM reading on this one. Let's see what happens. Cool. So got the idle thing fixed. Time to look at some data logs and make some adjustments. Do it again. All right, well, everything's looking pretty happy. I did find a little programming error on the air temp sensor. So it was showing artificially high air temp and actually pulling timing out of it. So I took that out. So it should show a little bit more power because it was pulling out like 4 degrees of timing. Gonna make another pull, turn it a little bit harder on the RPM. And then look at some more data, and then hopefully wrap this thing up with a few more pulls. Yeah. All right, 459 horsepower. That was, I think, about 6,600 RPM. I will know here in just a second. Yeah, 6,600, like I thought. Peak power is at 6,400 and above. This thing has a very light clutch in it, which is some of the bucking when I'm getting going. Normally when you're on the track with one of these, you kind of just rev it up and let it spin the tires a little bit. But I'm not going to do that on the dyno and tear his tires up. So that's all looking pretty good. Now I can actually start doing a little bit more. We'll try giving it a little bit more timing in some different areas and see if it responds. Cool, everything's going well so far. All right, let's try another one. See what we got. around the peak. So he's going to be wanting to ship this thing about 7,100, it looks like. That was 470. This thing definitely liked the timing. Might squeak it a little bit more. Looks like it picked up with that 1.5 degrees. Picked up 5. So really, as tight as that is, things on the track are different than things on the dyno, so we don't want to necessarily put the thing on kill on the dyno and then it go out and hurt itself at the racetrack. So load up a few more changes, look at the data log. Just might call this a day. All right, so instead of doing timing on this one, I decided to try leaning it out 0.2 of an air fuel point, and we'll see how the power responds. The dyno will tell us exactly what the car wants. We can take this thing out for a little drive, make sure everything seems normal driving it around, and give it back to Phil. Let him go finish it up and go racing. So leaning it out, looks like it picked up 3 horsepower. And by my way of thinking, that ain't really worth doing. Because we don't really want to have the thing on edge, especially when he's beating this thing around a racetrack. Temperature may be hotter, maybe the air temperature may be hotter outside. Without going to the track and really finalizing the thing, you know, I think we're plenty safe right there. All right, so saw a couple little areas I thought I could tweak to make it a little bit better. And then we're gonna take the information from this pull, look at the information from last pull, and then make a final tune to send it down the road with. That'll be that. So let's see what we can come up with. Pretty much spot on the last one. Cool. So I'm gonna take out what I just did, and that'll be it for the dyno. All right, so that's gonna end this video of Phil's NASCAR Cup Car turned road race car on our dyno here at KSR. So you can see the difference in the tune early here from where we ended up. And I thought my tune was a little bit conservative to begin with once we kind of got it started off. But I'd much rather be on the conservative side than send it on something that was aggressive or something that had previously worked with another car, because you never really know how everything works out, whether the crankshaft position sensor tone wheel is in the exact same place, because the factory LSs did have a little bit of wiggle room to where it was okay from the factory, but when you plug an aftermarket computer into them, you have to go through and verify that timing. This motor doesn't have a timing pointer on it, so I can't really verify it. But what I did was just use the dyno to figure out where it liked the timing. You know, the timing is just a number. So if we figure out where it makes best power, dial it back just a degree or two to go take it to the track, and everything should be safe. At least that's my theory. It's always worked for me in the past. That's the way we'll keep doing until somebody educates me better on that. But yeah, all the way up here, 475.7 peak horsepower, I believe. And turned it, basically it's gonna wanna shift somewhere 72, 7,300. You can see at 70, basically right at 7,300 when I stepped off of it. It's still making 463, let's call it. And it's above that, 463 all the way from 6,300. Now I'm not sure how the gearing is exactly in the transmission, but ideally we'd want to gear it to where when you shift out here, it falls back to, you know, somewhere right here where it's still making lots of horsepower. And that should be the fastest way to run it at the road racetrack. You know, when you're on a road course, typically you're only working within usually a 1,500 RPM, maybe a 2,000 RPM window if it's a really fast track and you've got the car geared, like say for Daytona or something, for the road course at Daytona. This thing should have the capability of going 175-ish miles an hour on the road course at Daytona, based off of some stuff that I know from our other cars we've run, and maybe a little quicker. But right now it's geared to where at 7,300, it's at 171 miles per hour on the dyno. So if he goes to a track, say like Sebring or Road Atlanta, top speed for something like this is probably only 155. So he could change the rear gear to make it to where it's 7,300 at 160 miles an hour. And then that's gonna tighten up the RPM drop between every other gear. And when the NASCAR guys get really fancy, they start changing gears in the transmission and getting all kinds of silly with stuff with really, really expensive transmissions. So that's gonna wrap up this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A little bit of a long dyno tuning video, or maybe it's a long video. I don't know how the editing worked out, but that's gonna wrap it up. Thanks again for watching. See you guys next time.